Welcome back. So, as most of you may not have encountered any errors yet because the code, of course, is provided for you. And if you follow the code exactly, you will also not have run into any issues. But in the future, as you practice your tutorials or other resources that we provide to you, you may run into certain errors. And this section of the course is to teach you how to debug some of these errors. So let's actually look at some of the code that I've provided, such as in order to print a value. So let me go to my Jupyter notebook and we see that we run into an error here. And whenever there's an error, Python actually is quite helpful. It will actually tell you what type of error it is. So in this case, it is a name error, and it will even tell you what line the error occurs at. So here we know that in this line there is some error, but we are still not sure what actually it is. We only know that there's an error with one of the names. When they say name print is not defined, that's where we notice that, hey, this word print is not green like usual. There's something different about it. Can you spot it? I'm sure you are able to. And the difference is that it is a capital P instead of small letter p. So if we change it to a small letter p, we see that it executes correctly. Next, we look at this thing called a syntax error. So again, we want to print out something and we're printing 3 plus and a close bracket. So what does it tell us? It tells us that, hey, in line 2, there's this error. They even include a caret sign for you to know that, hey, the error occurs somewhere after the plus. And it says invalid syntax. So syntax error means that there is actually some issue with the code that you have typed. Although they may not be very sure about exactly what the error is, it is something that the Python compiler is not able to understand. So that is where we see that there's an invalid syntax. Lastly, we have this thing called a type error. So again, we have another print statement, 3 plus ABC. So in this case, they say that there's a type error. It is in line 2. And it is saying, this particular type error is saying that they are not able to support two operators, or rather the plus operator, for two different types, integer and string. So if we wanted to convert this, or we wanted to make this both strings, so for example, if we use single quotation mark to encapsulate the tree, we will see that it works perfectly already. So those are the 3 common types of errors that we will commonly encounter. Lastly, we have this thing called an exception error. So an exception error occurs when the compiler actually doesn't recognize it as an error, but we know that under certain circumstances, an error will occur. So let me just show you. So for example, 10 divided by x, and let's say x equals to 5. If we run both of these lines, we know that we can see that there's no error. But if we change x equals to 0 and run this line again, we see that there's a zero division error. So we can't divide anything by 0, therefore it is throwing an error. So this error only occurs under very specific circumstances, and we want to be able to catch those errors so that our program doesn't crash. So instead of crashing the program, because we already foresee this error, we can use an exception to manage the error so that it does something else. So let's see how we can use this exception. So exception code always starts with try, and when we use the keyword try, the computer is checking whether when they run this line, does it work or does it not work. So in the event that 10 divided by x works, then it will just print out the value. So for example, if I change x equals to 5, we see that it just prints out the answer of 10 divided by x, which is 2.0. But the moment that x changes to 0, and the compiler throws an error when you try to divide 10 by 0, then we will see this divide by 0 error instead of crashing the program and throwing an error here. So this allows us to catch certain errors that we foresee ahead of time. So that brings us to the end of the section on errors. I hope it is clearer now. In the next section, we will continue on with learning about a few new variable types. Thank you and see you in the next video.